All right, friends, it's been a while, but here I'm back. Dr. Gily here. I'm an internal medicine physician and nutritionist. And today I want to talk to you about something very important, and that is how do we deal with cravings during weight loss? Cravings are a problem in and of themselves, even when we don't want to lose weight. But as you well know, if you've tried to lose weight, when you restrict your diet in one way or another, cravings come back with a vengeance and oftentimes account for the reason why we give up, we fail at losing weight. Now, I have to try to be at least balanced here and acknowledge the fact that some people don't have much of a problem with food cravings, and at the other extreme, there are some of us who have an awful time dealing with them, even when we don't want to lose weight, let alone when we try to do so. So this episode, this material for the next few minutes that I'm going to describe here and present here is geared towards those of us who have a sweet tooth, who have an addiction to sugar or addiction to certain food items that we really enjoy, whether it's chocolate or cakes or candy or whatever it may be. And here, I think it's appropriate to also mention the fact that when we talk about food cravings, a lot of us, for a lot of us, that means that we are addicted to sweet things, some of the items that I just mentioned. But for others, it could be alcohol, it could be caffeine-containing beverages, or it could be a mixture of this. The food industry, for several decades now, has been very busy in putting together food items that are very addictive, and you need to be aware of that. I've talked about this before briefly, but it's very important to bring it back here. So when you go out shopping, whether in a grocery store or whether at a gas station or whatever you may be aware and make a conscious decision to not act on impulse. The very first items that hit your eyes and your nose, your senses, are the most addictive things. Even at the checkout counter, they put those right there in front of you. So unless you have a premeditated plan where you say, I'm not going to touch these things, oftentimes you'll find yourself that you fall victim to those attempts. And those are items that have very concentrated sugar, very concentrated fat, and a lot of salt, or a combination of 2 or 3 of these items. In the food industry, they actually have specialized terms for this. They call those that are designed to be addictive through their sugar content, items that give you that sugar bliss. Those that aim at satisfying your fat taste, those are very smooth, mouth-melting, giving you mouth-melting sensations. And likewise, the salt, when it hits your taste buds, that's the same, it's like a flavor explosion, they call it. And of course, when you mix these things together, you have items that when you open the bag and you start eating them, usually you can't put it down until you finish it, and then even then you desire for more. So you need to be aware of this context when we talk about food cravings. And as I was thinking about how to present this and how to put together some tips about how to deal with food cravings when we try to lose weight, I came out with an acronym. And the acronym brings a tip or a strategy to deal with cravings for each letter of the word craving. So we'll head straight into that and discuss all these tips about how to deal with cravings, the 7 tips of dealing with food cravings when you want to lose weight. Now, before that, a short disclaimer, but very important. I'm a physician, I'm a nutritionist. What I present here is purely for educational, informational, perhaps entertainment purpose. I'm not here to treat any individual person or condition. For that, you need to talk to your personal physician, to your primary care provider, because again, this is not the medium for personalized medical advice and treatment. So let's move on. First tip to deal with food cravings. For the letter C in the word cravings, I decided to entitle that consequences. And what that means is simply, before you give in, when you are tempted to go for that sugary drink or for that chocolate or whatever it is that tempts you, make the habit to sit down for a minute, not more than a minute, and just think about the consequence. Play the tape in your mind of what's going to happen, how you're going to feel after you eat that item or plate of cookies or whatever it is. Is that going to be worth after you are done with satisfying your craving? What are some of the other consequences for your weight? Are you going to ruin a week or more of work when it comes to exercise and restraining yourself and following your plan to lose weight? And here comes this moment, you give in and boom, you ruined it all. Is that going to be worth it? And the reason I say this is very important for us to use our rational, superior mental faculties to balance those urges that are purely emotional and not very logical, not very rational. And if we manage to do that, it's a big if here, and I'm going to talk more about this at the very end under the letter G from craving. But if we get to where we can do this and we regulate those urges and those emotional impulses, you're going to see a lot more success on the long term when it comes to weight loss just by doing this. The second tip, the letter R from the word craving stands for run the clock. Run the clock. So how do you do that? It's a well-known fact in the psychology world and in the world of treating addiction that cravings come and go. You know, people who quit smoking, for example, we routinely counsel them. And what I tell them, I say, listen, have a watch, you know, with a seconds hand or an electronic one for that matter, like a stopwatch on your smartphone. Start the clock or the stopwatch and time the craving. When you feel the urge to give in, when you feel I need to get this food, you know, it's too good to pass. Take again a moment and say, you know what, I'm going to time this craving for 1 minute. If you can do a minute and a half, like 90 seconds, it's even better. Because what you will see, and what is demonstrably true for most people, is that the craving goes up and it really, really tests your resolve. And within a minute or so, maybe more, maybe less, up to 90 seconds for some people, you hit the top, the climax, when it's almost irresistible. And then right after that, you go downhill with it, and the intensity of that craving drops dramatically. So again, if you time that and you take the moment to do that consistently, what you will find is that you can resist that craving a lot easier if you give it that time, that minute or two when it's most intense. It'll come back, but you can time it again. You can use some of the other tips I'm giving you here. But the idea is you will become stronger and more confident. Your ability to resist will improve dramatically. And the other thing that you need to remember here is that food addiction or cravings, just like addiction to nicotine or other substances, is most intense in the first few days after you make a change. After the first few days, the first week or two, these cravings will become much less frequent and much less powerful. So there is value in resisting, okay? There is light at the end of the tunnel, so don't despair. So we talked about consequences for C, run the clock for R. The next letter in the word craving with tips for you is A, and that stands for activity. And that is usually mostly physical activity. And what I mean by that is, again, when you are hit with a strong craving, any of the circumstances allow, it's not always possible, but a lot of times it is. You just have to think about it and act on it. When you get that strong urge to act, take even 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes if you can. Get out, put your walking shoes, your running shoes, whatever exercise you like to do, get your bike and go out and exercise. You don't have to break even a sweat. You just go out there in the fresh air and in the crisp morning air. If it's a cooler weather, even if it's snowing, just walk in the snow or rain, whatever it is. Take your umbrella, okay? No excuse here. You can find a way to exercise, is what I'm trying to say, even for 5 minutes. And what you will find is not only that intensity of the craving that I mentioned earlier will start to go down during that period of time, but more importantly, exercise is a great way to drive these cravings away from you, to refocus your mind, to balance those urges inside your brain. You will feel more energized, you'll feel happier inside, and that craving for the chocolate or whatever food it is will no longer seem more as appealing. And you will also refocus your efforts on losing the weight. You'll see, okay, I'm exercising again, I'm on the right track, here I am, I'm good. All right, next letter from craving, letter V. That stands for visualize it. Now, when I say visualize it, I'm referring to a psychological technique called that would fall under the label of mindfulness. You see, as I mentioned earlier, when we get cravings, the emotional, the addiction pathways inside our brain scream at us with the power of irresistible desire. Eat me. I'm here. You need me. Eat me right away. Don't even think about it. Just gobble it down and finish the whole thing. Okay? That's what the craving is. That's what addiction to a food usually manifests as. So again here, like I said before, if you get the power, and we'll talk at the end about this some more, but once you get the power to be able to stop and say, listen, I'm going to take a moment here. I'm not going to act yet on the addiction, on the urge. I'm not going to listen to your command to eat me right now. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to visualize in my mind how this urge, how this craving comes and goes. We talked about running the clock earlier. When you do visualizing, you just don't sit there suffering and sweating and feeling miserable. What you do is you detach inside your mind. Nothing spooky here. You just become objective and you say, almost like a spectator, I'm going to watch this game between the so-called irresistible urge in my mind that's trying to destroy me and my efforts to lose weight and my, surroundings. What am I doing here? I'm getting out and walking or biking, or what am I doing? I'm breathing this fresh, crisp air. I'm smelling the flowers. I feel the smell of cars if you're biking next to them, okay, and the exhaust. I'm hearing the wind, okay? Pay attention to your surroundings and tune into your senses. It's not just a simple matter of distracting yourself from the craving. What it is, this mindfulness allows you to become more objective and more rational, to where you look at what you're doing and you say, you know what? This thing is just one little part of me. It's not so irresistible as I thought it was. It's just a parasitic thing coming from the addiction pathways in my brain that I want to remove, I want to control. And lo and behold, before you know it, if you keep practicing this mindfulness technique of visualizing what's happening when you get the cravings, you will become stronger and more able to resist it. So V, visualize, the fourth letter of the word craving. The next one is the letter I, and I'm wondering if you can guess what that is. I stands for insulate or isolate. Either one works. If you wanted to use either of them, that's fine with me. They both convey the idea of you need to plan ahead, like I hinted earlier when you go shopping or at home, and isolate or insulate yourself from the object of your craving. Now, if your fridge or if your pantry are full of, chocolate and sweet drinks and junk food and stuff that you are addicted to, you're not going to resist it. And likewise, when you go to shop, and you see these things and you don't have a plan, it's a lot less likely that you'll be able to ignore them if you have a problem with being addicted to them. So when you insulate yourself, you re-engineer your environment at home, at work, with your friends, and you say, listen, I'm on this journey to lose weight. I have a problem with these foods. And tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, help me with this. Don't tempt me with this thing, okay? Don't put it under my nose, because I'm going to fall for it, all right? So you make this plan and you remove all these things from your house. You don't buy them. You give them to, your enemies. Throw them away if it comes to that. And so it's not, beyond the door of the pantry and the fridge, the object of your craving. And it's not in your face when you cook, when you look for healthy alternatives, all right? This is basic stuff, but it's so important. I tell you, I have patients in nursing homes who are suffering the consequences of decades of yielding to food addictions and other issues, with advanced type 2 diabetes, with other issues like that. And I have reports that I get facts from the nursing home saying, so and so, we found cookies under his or her pillow. We found candy hidden under the mattress. I mean, imagine that. You reach the point where you are getting close to the end of your life and you're still feeding that addiction with everything you have. I mean, how pathetic is that? Think about that as you are young, hopefully, and still in good health. Do you want to get to that point, or do you want to experience vibrant life and health? Anyway, that was just a tangent here about insulating yourself from the object of the addiction. I'll tell you another little story here if you have a minute. And when I was growing up in Romania, there is a famous, relatively speaking, writer. He was also a physician. Vasile Voiculescu is his name. And among other things he wrote a short story of this monk. In Romania, the predominant Christian church is the Greek Orthodox Church, and monahism is a big thing for them. So anyway, he tells this story of this person who wants to become more pure and more in control of their destiny and of his addictions. And in his case, he was addicted to alcohol. He liked to drink, okay? Booze was his problem. So he goes into this monastery and he prays, every morning at 5 a.m. and multiple times through the day. He does this special diets. He goes on this trips to these holy places, and he does all these things, and yet he still feels like he's weak when it comes to alcohol. So one day, and I forgot the details, but the main idea is he brings a bunch of bottles of alcohol into his cell. He lived in this very austere cell as a monk in the monastery. It was all made of carved in a rock, cold, no heat, sleeping on a stone bed. And he had a little pantry there. And he stuffed that up with alcoholic beverages, because in his mind, he thought that he had the object of his temptation right in front of him there. And he kept fighting it day and night, day and night. Eventually, he's going to win the battle and he's going to come out victorious. Suffice it to say that it didn't play at all that way, and for a good reason, because our human nature is such that the more you distance yourself from the object of your temptation, of your craving, the more likely you are going to succeed, and not the other way around. So again, insulate yourself. Isolate from the word craving is another tip I have for you. Another one, N from craving. Letter N stands for normalize it. This may sound counterintuitive. Until now, Doc, you told me about, run away from it, and it's not normal, and it's bad, and it's ruining your life. How do you normalize it now? Well, by normalizing, what I mean is that we need an attitude toward cravings, toward problems with foods, that acknowledges the fact that we are human. We are this crooked timber, if you want to call it that way. Our nature is not perfect. at least in our current state. This has connotations for your vision on where we come from, who we are, and where we go from here. I'm not going to go into that. And we all have our ideas about those things. But if you look objectively of how our nature works, we are not perfect unless somebody is, narcissist and thinks everything they do is perfect. We are far from perfect, and we have flaws, and we can fall, some for different things. Some fall for addictions. Some are gullible and fall for schemes of all sorts, financial and otherwise. I had a patient not too long ago who fell for one of these scams from Nigeria, and she lost her whole house and her savings to the point that she had to come and live with her daughter because she lost everything to these scammers. Not all of us fall, but for each one of us, there are things that we are vulnerable, that we are less than capable or able to deal with. And so when I say normalize it, I'm simply saying that we need to acknowledge this reality that sometimes, not for all of us, like I said, everybody's different, but for some of us, food cravings are stronger than us or are a huge problem. And we need to acknowledge that before you find a solution to a problem. Excuse me. You need to acknowledge that that problem exists in the first place, right? So that's all I'm saying here with normalizing it, is to come to the realization that, listen, I have a problem. If that's true for you or for me, I have a problem, and I need to acknowledge, and I need to realize that it is part of me. It's who I am, and this is what I'm dealing with. And this brings me very nicely to the last tip that I'm going to give you here, and that is letter G. And I decided to make that stand for God, okay? The word cravings, the last letter G stands for craving, stands for God. What do I mean by that? Well, I don't want to come across as proselytizing here. I respect everybody's religion or lack thereof. That's not what I'm trying to do here. However, I also have to say that as a physician, when I deal with people addicted to alcohol, to narcotic pain medications, to nicotine, to foods, or a million of other things, and we go to try to help them out, go to the psychologist, go to this program, that program, try this, try that, try my tips that I just gave you, right? The 6 tips that I just mentioned earlier, or whatever else is out there. What we consistently see is a pattern where there is failure, try again, and failure again. There's this cycle of trying and failing, trying and failing and failing. And it's a spiraling down where these people go down further and further and further. And here's where the road splits. At some point, everybody reaches their bottom, and it's different for everybody. For somebody, the bottom is to become homeless, or to end up in the hospital, or whatever it is. Everybody reaches their bottom with their addiction one day or on another, sooner or later. And when that happens, what I see is 2 things. One, they go on a recovery road. The other part is they end up dying one way or another, either from an overdose or the consequences of the addiction. So the key question here is, what makes the difference in those who manage to recover? And usually the difference involves a variant of going through the 12-step program. Not for everybody. I'm not trying to claim here that there's no other way than that. Some people find resources that are somehow built in to recover, at least for a while, and there are relapses in all. So that's a separate discussion. But if we look at programs and what actually makes a difference for addiction of any sort, the 12-step program stands out as one of the most effective ways to deal with addiction, whether it's alcohol, narcotics, or other addictions. And I think there is a reason for that. It's not a random thing. And that is, the reason is that if you are familiar, or if you go and look up the 12-step program, it starts with, number 1, a realization that we, as addicted persons, are powerless against our addiction. And number two, with the other realization that's even more important, that on our own, because we are powerless, we can't break it, we can conquer it, we can overcome it. However, we realize that there is a power higher. There's a higher power than ourselves that can help us, and that is God. However you understand it, everybody has their own understanding and experience, spiritually speaking, about who God is and what their relationship with their God is. But the interesting thing is, regardless of that, leaving that all aside, again, I'm not proselytizing here in any way, if somebody reaches out to their God as they understand Him, what we see is the start of a process of recovery. And it's not to say that falling off is no longer an option. You have free choice up to your very last conscious moment. But if somebody is keeping on that track and making amends to themselves, to those around them that they hurt through their addiction, and working to help others in that context, with this reach out for the higher power, they tend to be a lot more successful than others who don't do this. So that's the reason I brought God into this equation of tips to control for addiction to food as we try to lose weight. And for those of you who are Christian or familiar with the Christian scriptures, I am a Christian myself, I will also hint to very famous, there are many passages that can be of help for those who find their spiritual nourishment in the Bible. But there is one particular passage that comes to mind that the Apostle Paul mentions in the New Testament in one of his letters. And he says there that no temptation or no urge, if we want to contextualize it for food addiction, no craving for food addiction, let's put it that way, has reached you, my friend, that is not matched for human power. And then he goes to say something very similar to what the 12 Steps program says. And if you find that your human power is not sufficient for that craving, for that food addiction, he says that God has prepared the way out of it. The moment he allows that addiction, that craving to come in, he has already prepared the way for you to get out of it. And I really like that picture, because what it tells us again is what I said earlier, is that there is power out there we can reach out to enable us to take that moment, that 90-second, to decide, I'm going to time this out. If that's what we want to do, we can go through the whole thing again, to the whole list. We can take that moment, that power to pause and resist this cry to eat me. And we say, well, I want to think of consequences first. I want to run the clock for at least 90 seconds. I want to go out and walk a little bit. I want to sit down inside myself and meditate and visualize this whole thing. And then I want to make a plan and insulate myself from the object of my food addiction. And I want to, again, recognize that this is a normal part of my human experience, but with a higher power that I can reach out to, I'm going to be successful. And that's my desire and my hope for you, my friend, that you will be successful. And until next time, I wish you all the luck, and feel free to send me your reaction and feedback on this. And to the extent that there is interest for more of this, I'll be happy to produce more materials like this. Until next time, you stay healthy and you stay safe from all those food cravings, my friend. Thank you.